color, hope, live, faith, free, love.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleam, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streamed, and the rockets racked the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Forward, march.
Now it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our founder and president. He started Virtutem Populo in order to encourage youth participation in government and their communities. He strongly believes that one must be the change they want to see in the world. That is why he has successfully written and passed infrastructure and flooding legislation at the municipal level to improve his community. Currently, he is a sophomore at Hialeah Miami Lakes Senior High, where he serves as Student Council Secretary, ESAC Secretary, President of Key Club, and Vice President of the Model United Nations team. He was a student at Miami Lakes School, where his dedication to the students and staff led to the administration creating an award that bears his name. He still remains as assistant coach for their Law Studies program today. He is vice chair of the Town of Miami Lakes Youth Activities Task Force, student member of the town's Education Advisory Board, legislative liaison for the MDCPS District Student Government Association, and student representative for the Miami-Dade County Council of PTAs. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Moritz Acosta.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for the very warm introduction, and welcome everybody. I'm so proud and happy to see so many of you here today. As Ashley said, my name is Maurice and I'm the president of Virtutem Populo, and we're so excited to have you all join us today at this event sponsored by the Epic Foundation and the Town of Miami Lakes. We will have 4 amazing speakers presenting here today to inspire the youth, the next generation, and to educate on the Constitution. As many of you know, Saturday is Constitution Day, and it is in honor of that we hosted this event. I would like to thank Brianna for her amazing performance of the national anthem, as well as the thank you, yes. I would also like to thank the Hialeah Miami Lakes JROTC, for their presentation of colors as well. Now, I'd like to introduce someone who's going to give brief welcoming remarks before the beginning of our next presentation. It is because of him that we have been able to do so much, and he has really always uplifted the student voice, allowing us to work with him on several projects. Even though we're all kids, he's always treated us as adults, and it's because of that myself with other students have been able to pass laws in the town and do so much more. Please welcome Mr. Mayor Manny Sin.
Thank you, Moritz. Wow, what a crowd tonight for Constitution Day. And two things that make me really excited about this year's Constitution Day here in the town of Miami Lakes. The first one, it coincides with Citizenship Day. And we know the most important thing in our society are active citizens. That, I believe, the moment that we are either born as citizens or we're natural or we take the oath to become citizens, that's the most important part, being an active citizen. And as you can see today, all the young people in the crowd, that's what makes me truly excited about this year. Secondly, it's the young folks. Constitution Day this year is literally run by young people. It wasn't the town that said, it wasn't me that woke up and said, we have to have an event here in the town of Miami Lakes to talk about the importance of our Constitution. It was young people like Moritz and Virtutem Populo and all the other students throughout our county that said, hey, the importance of being an active citizen, the importance of our Constitution, of our town charter, of our state constitution, of our county charter is incredibly important. We have to have that conversation. So think about how everything's changing in our society. For a very long time, the only folks whose voices were heard were those that were 18 and over, could vote. Sometimes people were apathetic. Maybe just the seniors in that community were the only ones that voted. But here, we're starting to see that change. People who are 14 years old, 15 years old, 16 years old, 17 years old, they're not even registered to vote, but they're making laws in their own community. How powerful is that? That is so truly motivating for me as mayor, because I can tell you that's what makes our town so special. Because not only do we have an incredible amount of seniors that are involved, incredible amount of older adults, of young adults, of folks who just graduate, but the young people. So we have everybody's voice is heard at the table here in the town of Miami Lakes. And that is thanks in part to and thanks to Virtutem Populo. This organization led by Moritz and volunteers has made such a difference here in the town of Miami Lakes. And I am seeing that difference made with all the young people. Who's in middle school here? Think about that. You're in middle. That's amazing. High schoolers. That is so amazing. Well, by middle school, you guys got it. I mean, you guys are like 90% of. Think about how powerful that is. It is a Friday night, and you guys are in middle school here at City Hall, learning about your federal constitution, your state constitution, your county charter, and your town charter. God bless you all, because you guys have ingrained in me and have opened up the eyes of our entire society as to the understanding that our future is brighter than ever thanks to you all. So God bless you all. Keep doing what you're doing, and let's go, Moritz. Virtutem Populo all the way. You guys are really doing an amazing job. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mayor. So now, as we go throughout the night, I just like to share a quick quote before we get to our first speaker, which is something I'd like for all of you guys to keep in mind. It's a quote by Thomas Sowell, and he says, "The Constitution cannot protect us unless we protect the Constitution." And that's why it's so incredibly important that we're all gathered here today to expand our knowledge, to learn more, because when we educate ourselves on the Constitution, that's the only true way that we can protect it. So to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Lorenzo Cobiella, he's a partner at Gastesi, Lopez, and Mestre, PLLC, and he serves as the deputy town attorney for the town of Miami Lakes. And a little bit about Mr. Cobiella, he, just like Mayor Sid, has 100% of the way, always, if a student comes to him with an idea, sends an email, he has met with me on Zoom, with my peers on Zoom, always opened the door for us, enabling us to develop policy with him. And that's a truly special thing and I thank you so much for that, because it's because of Mr. Kobiella that we were able to actually make a real change in our town. And a little bit more about him: he received his Juris Doctorate degree from Barry University School of Law and a bachelor's degree from Florida International University. Mr. Kobiella is a former president of the Miami Lakes Bar Association. He is also involved with the Florida Bar, the Florida Municipal Attorneys Association, the Miami-Dade County Commission on Human Rights, and so much more. Please give it up for Mr. Lorenzo Kobiella. Let me get the clicker working.
So I'm gonna try to use this, but I'm one that likes to walk around, so I'm also gonna try to do this. All right. So here we go. So what I'm going to be presenting to you today is I had talked about this and given this some thought when I talked to Moritz. And as he said, my name is Lorenzo Kobiella. I work here in the town. I'm designated, so I'm here 9 to 5. And my job is to be basically the attorney. So I help different departments that come to me with different ideas or different issues or different contracts, and kind of guide through that process. We handle the town's litigation as well if there's lawsuits involved. And also part of my job too is to help the council in giving different types of legal opinions and ideas as to what is they're able to do and what they're not able to do. And all of our laws, all of these rules, our charter, everything that we know today and we follow in this country of laws. And that's a beautiful thing. This is a country of laws. Okay. Sometimes people say that Americans are too litigious. Maybe, but that is what keeps us in check. That is what keeps us a peaceful country, a country where we have transition, where we have democratic values, because we have laws that are respected, and we have a system. And that system emanates from this Constitution, right? And all of you, I think, received a little Constitution, or he told me he was going to send constitutions. Do any of you have a little Constitution with you? Can you please raise it? All right, that looks like a very thin document. I've got a different Constitution. And do you know why this is a, let's see, it's so thick and has so many pages in it, is because the Constitution has been interpreted and been evaluated and looked at and worked on for years, since its inception, since 1789, when this country took root and this Constitution started taking, became the law of the land. And we had President Washington inaugurated, and we had the first Congress inaugurated, and we had the first U.S. Supreme Court inaugurated, right? And since that point in time, you have a U.S. Supreme Court that has taken this document and has reviewed cases and has made case law and has created precedent. And that precedent is what we have today as, you know, what the law is, okay? Because at the end of the day, the U.S. Supreme Court decided what the law is. So from this first document, of that simple document that you're holding in your hand, the U.S. Supreme Court has kind of evolved what that document means, what it means today. So with that, I want to talk about two principles. What is judicial review and what is stare decisis, right? U.S. Supreme Court, here we go. Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution established that judicial power of the United States shall be vested in a Supreme Court. And then there's going to be inferior courts, as many as the Congress from time to time decides that they want, that judges both from the Supreme and inferior court shall hold their offices during good behavior, shall be at all stated time received for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuance in office. Section 2, now is where we get to a little bit of the meat of this. The judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under that Constitution which you have in your hand, the laws of the United States, the treatises made on which shall be made under their authority to all cases affecting ambassadors and other public ministers and consuls, to all cases of admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to all controversies which the United States shall be a party, to controversies between two or more states, between a state and citizens of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state claiming lands under grants of different states, and between a state or the citizens thereof and foreign states, citizens or subjects. Now, it says, in all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, and those in which a state shall be a party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction, right? Okay, again, and this is important because I'm going to talk a little bit about a really cool case, but you got to know this part first. In all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, and those in which a state shall have a party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction, okay? In all other cases before mentioned, the Supreme Court shall have appellate jurisdiction, both to law and to fact, with exceptions under the regulations and Congress shall make. All right, so Article 3 established the Supreme Court. Article 2 established, does anybody know? The legislature. And Article 1 established the presidency. And so therefore, the first three articles establishes the three main branches of government. I'm sorry, Article 1 is the Congress, Article 2 is the executive. Thank you, Mr. Planas, Professor. So you've got this article and you've got this the Constitution. It lays out what Article 3 is. Now, Congress has to kind of take that and has got to create kind of a law. And that's kind of how things happen, right? Even in the town, we started out with a charter and then we started out with ordinances that carried through with what that charter meant and what the different powers and different things that can happen. So one of the things that they set out in 1789 is the Judiciary Act, okay? It figures out what and how many justices were going to be on the bench. It figured out who what were going to be the inferior courts, created circuit courts, it created district courts, it created the Office of Attorney General of the United States that was going to be the person to argue on behalf of the U.S. government. It also created what were U.S. attorneys and U.S. marshals for each of those districts. Also, one of the first things that happened is that they created the first Chief Justice, which was Justice John Jay. John Jay is a fascinating person, all right? So John Jay served as ambassador to Spain during the Revolutionary War, and he was instrumental in getting the Spanish to support and send money over to the new established independent United States, which wasn't independent, was fighting Great Britain. Justice John Jay also later on was instrumental in writing and being one of the authors of the Federalist Papers. The Federalist Papers are documents of essays that were actually written promoting the Constitution so that the states would ratify it and giving the thoughts and the importance of having a federalist type system where you have a strong government and you have states. And John Jay was then appointed by George Washington to serve as the first Chief Justice. Now, he didn't last long. He lasted for about 3-4 years, and then you've got a couple of justices afterwards. Really, what he wanted to do is he wanted to be governor of New York, and that's what he does. He eventually becomes governor of New York. But he is important in the fact that he creates this. And actually, a funny thing was Justice John Jay is actually known for a treaty known as the Jay Treaty, which comes much later, which kind of establishes a certain peace with Great Britain while because Great Britain, even after the War of Independence, thought the United States was kind of, yeah, you have your independence, but we can go ahead and take your ships and take your sailors, and we can go ahead and have forts all over the place, and we're pretty much still, Great Britain, and you guys are still, even though we gave you the independence, not really so much. We're going to respect that so much. But John Jay was able to create that. And one thing that's important, and I'm rambling, but I want to kind of get this gist across, is that during this period of time, you've got this struggle in the United States. You've got these state representatives, and you've got this force of people that are pro-federalists, right? They believe in the creation of a strong court, okay? And you have those that are anti-federalists, and they believe that the court shouldn't be that strong. They believe that the court, a strong court could be tyrannical. A strong court undermines people's rights And this struggle between these two is something that leads to several Bill of Rights. You've got 5 Bill of Rights that are in the Bill of Rights, 5 amendments that deal directly with rights to protect citizens, rights of search and seizure, right to a fair trial. So all these things are created and kind of embedded in these First Amendments. And so this struggle is something that's very important, because what ends up happening is that after the first 3 justices, you've got Justice John Jay, Rutledge, and Ellsworth, comes the appointment of John Marshall. And so I kind of wanted to lay the groundwork, and I'm rambling because I know I've got limited time. So I wanted to give you kind of a preview of what's going on in the United States. We've got a new constitution. We've got these 3 branches of government. We've got a new U.S. Supreme Court. This U.S. Supreme Court listened to a couple of cases before John Marshall came in. You've got this struggle and this tension between these Federalists and these anti-Federalists, which eventually become the Democratic Republicans. And this country is trying to get its footing and trying to figure out who it is and what it is. This is a new experiment. Democracy was very new in the world, and the United States was a pioneer in doing so. And so John Marshall gets appointed. John Marshall's an interesting guy. He's serving as Secretary of State at the end of John Adams' presidency. And John Adams has to appoint somebody else. Ellsworth leaves, and he's got to appoint somebody as a Chief Justice. And so he calls his friend John Jay, who's up in New York, and says, John, I need you back. And John is like, no, I don't want it. I already did it. I'm about to retire in New York and go back to my farm. Sorry. So he taps John Marshall. Now, he's wrapping up his job as Secretary of State, and John Adams is losing to Thomas Jefferson. Okay, Thomas Jefferson is going to become the president of the United States. And so John Marshall, believe it or not, is in one foot, he's a Chief Justice, and another one, he's still kind of acting as Secretary of State. Something that would never happen, because that would be a complete conflict, but it happened then. And so John Adams says, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to pack the courts. I'm going to make sure I get as many of my guys in there as possible before I leave, because definitely Jefferson is not the guy. He's going to get his own people in there, and I want to make sure that I've got my people that believe in these principles of federalism, and I want to make sure that they're there. So he goes ahead and starts sending these appointments. Now, what happens is that because of the mail, some of these appointments don't go through, and one of them goes to this guy called Marbury, and Marbury doesn't get his appointment after Thomas Jefferson takes the presidency. And so what happens is that Thomas Jefferson comes in and says, you know what, this guy Adams, he tried to pack the court. You know, he knew that I was going to be the president. That's it's my privilege to be able to do that. And you know what, I'm just not going to approve. I'm not going to approve Marbury's passage. So Marbury goes ahead and goes to the court directly and files what's called a writ of mandamus. He's asking the court to take jurisdiction of his case and to say that, yeah, he's got the right for the job. So, I mean, Marshall's got, he's in a pickle. He's in a bind right now, because think about it. If he goes ahead and he appoints Marbury, well, if I'm Thomas Jefferson as the president of the United States, I don't care what the U.S. Supreme Court says at that time. I'm the president. I'm just going to ignore it. If he votes for and he sides with Thomas Jefferson, then it looks like he's weak. He's just bending and just going ahead with whatever the president says. And so he looks weak himself. So being someone that, helped and pushed through the U.S. Constitution, wrote the Federalist Paper, he understands what the Constitution says. And he understands that the court has certain original jurisdiction on certain matters, but not on others. And so what happened is that the Act of 1789 gave the court additional powers of which the Constitution did not grant it. So in his opinion, he says, Marbury, you got a point here. You should have the job because, you know what, Adams did, send the letter to you. He did appoint you while he was still the president. So you should go, but I've got this problem. The problem I've got is that this action before me, I can't rule on it because the U.S. Constitution doesn't allow me to do this. So even though Congress passed it, I can't grant you the relief you're seeking. And so all of a sudden, he created something called judicial review. The U.S. Supreme Court told Congress, what you did was unconstitutional. You can't do that. Amazing, amazing, because what that led is to the Marshall Court, and John Marshall was actually one of the largest, or I think he served the longest period of time between 1800 to 1838, more or less, as Chief Justice of different decisions that were so important to the United States. You have McCulloch versus Maryland, which actually discusses the power, the extent of the power of the U.S. of Congress. You have Gibbons versus Ogden, which is one of the first cases, discusses the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause is so important. Recently, we had the case that decided that what we call the Obamacare case, right? That decided that the U.S. government could create a healthcare system, and that was based on the Commerce Clause in large part. So the Marshall Court ushers in these decisions that basically lay out the different roles of the U.S. government to be able to, in Cohen versus Virginia, be able to review state Supreme Court cases, and therefore creates the start of this beautiful document that we have here today, which is the U.S. Supreme Court's case to be able to review cases, judicial review. Very powerful. Now, stare decisis. I'm going to go a little bit into stare decisis now. I think judicial review is the most important thing and the most important power that our U.S. Supreme Court has. And all cases, all Supreme Court, state Supreme Courts have that similar power as well to review cases and kind of create law within the state, each state constitution, to be able to interpret what that state constitution says. Now, in the stare decisis is a little different. Stare decisis is a concept that is rooted in English common law, okay? And what it basically says is that you leave what is existing precedent alone. So if there was something that was decided as existing precedent, you leave it alone. What happened? Well, I'm going to get to that. Professor. I disagree with you on that. So in the Federalist Papers of number 78 in particular, was one of the first times where it's actually discussed the stare decisis. And one of the things that is written, actually, I think it was John Jay who wrote it, might have not been him, might have been James Madison, was basically saying how important stare decisis was in the role of the Supreme Court. Now, stare decisis in practice has two different, you have horizontal, the nation's higher court to follow its own principles. If you made a decision before, you try to stick to the same decision, same rationale, if it's the same type of case back pattern, right? The vertical is the judicial hierarchy compels basically the lower courts to follow its own decision, right? So if the U.S. Supreme Court decides something is the law, okay, for instance, that the U.S. government has control over the trafficking or U.S. banks, then the federal court has the right, Congress has the right to regulate U.S. banks. A state can't go in and try to regulate the banks because it's not allowed to. Okay, so it's, again, vertical hierarchy. And that is true also by the state Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court passes a case, a lower court can't go ahead and decide something just because the judge feels like, you know what, I disagree with the U.S. Supreme Court. With the state Supreme Court. You can't do that, right? So those are the two ways that it works. Now, from time to time, the U.S. Supreme Court will change direction. Stare decisis is not something that is you're supposed to, it doesn't say that you have to, you're obligated to follow the previous precedent. Previous precedent can change, and that has happened from time to time in our country's history. Chief Justice Roberts said, when he was asked, and during his confirmation hearings back in 2005, about stare decisis, and he said this: I do think it's a jolt to the legal system when you overrule a precedent. Precedent plays an important role in promoting stability and even-handedness. Justice Rehnquist, who came right before him, in a 1991 decision said, precedent is a principles of policy and not a mechanical formula of adherence to the latest decision. So you have two justices here that take a look at what stare decisis is in a slightly different way. What precedent does is make sense out of the tensions of the past and the rationality of the present. I think that this definition, and I'm forgetting now exactly where I got it from, but I like it. It says, precedent takes sense out of the tensions of the past and the rationality of the present. Throughout our history, the court has been so important in striking that balance as to what is precedent that should be followed and when it's made a mistake. Very good example of this is in 1954, there was a case called Brown versus the Board of Topeka. In that case, the court analyzed the fact that segregation between blacks and whites existed in schools. There was a case called Plessy versus Ferguson. It said, as long as it's separate but equal, it's okay, it's fine, you can do that, you can allow segregation. That court in 1954 took a look at this and said, you know what, we got it wrong. It wasn't right decision. And they ended segregation in schools. Now, that case, there was a bunch of cases that came afterwards. There were a lot of issues that came afterwards. There was a lot of disagreement as to how that Supreme Court arrived at that case. And in 1968, under Lyndon B. Johnson, they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1968, which eventually has got amended several times, and the case still stands. There's other cases too that we can cite to. They include Mapp versus Ohio, which overturned Wolf versus Colorado. This was in 1961, regarding the exclusionary rule in searches and seizures. If a search and seizure is done illegally, that is not done properly, it cannot be used in trial. Okay, and it's rooted in this 1961 Mapp versus Ohio. Wolf versus Colorado said you could to some degree. In 2003, Lawrence versus Texas overturned Bowers versus Harwick. Persons of same sex engaging in intimate relationships. It used to be that was illegal. In 2003, this case overturned it. In 2015, Overfeld versus Hodges said that people of same sex could get married, that it was a fundamental right, overturning previous case law. And now we get to 2022 versus Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which overturned Roe versus Wade. And the reason I'm bringing up this history is because there's a lot of talk out there about how the U.S. Constitution and there's some people that says stare decisis is out the window. That's no longer the law of the land. The Supreme Court's not abiding by its previous precedent. And I would disagree. In the years from 1798 till now, it's changed its ruling perhaps 174 times. 174 times when you take a look at a 200-plus year history. It's really not that much. The country in 1798 was extremely different, radically different than it is today. In 1798, slavery was okay. Women could not vote. Automobiles did not exist. Cell phones were present. This country was radically different. There was only 13 states. In 2022, we are 50 states. We are a nation of just vast people that have come together. We're a nation that respects its laws. And the Supreme Court has been that steady hand that has struck the balance between the wisdom of the past does, and history does have certain wisdom, but the flexibility to understand that you don't always have to follow the past decisions just because they were made once. You can make mistakes, and things sometimes are not always, you don't always get things right on the first time, right? And so that ability to understand and that tension between the justices of taking a look at matters is so important in how you read and how you study the Constitution. And so I wanted to leave you kind of with this idea that it is incumbent on all of you to read, to understand, to take a look at, when you read cases, understand how the justices arrived at that case law. What is it that they were applying? What tests were they applying? How did they analyze it? And understand and realize that the Constitution isn't just the thin little document that you have in your hand, but it's every single case. It's every single person that brought that matter that was important to them, that issue that was important to them, and was able to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court took that matter, so important, and analyzed it under that Constitution, under that document, to make a determination as to the rights that you have the rights that the government has, and how this country needs to be run as a democracy, as a representative democracy. And with that, I thank you for giving me your time and wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. Give it one more round of applause for Mr. Lorenzo Cobiella, please. Before we continue with the program, I would like to introduce a very special person who has recently arrived. Hello, testing. So I would like to introduce someone very special who made this event possible, and that is AJ Donaldson. I met AJ a few months ago right here in these chambers at an event hosted by Giving Gators. It was a community service event. We were giving away school supplies to children who needed it. And AJ, who is the founder and CEO of the EPIC Foundation. The EPIC Foundation, EPIC stands for Experienced Professionals Impacting Communities. And so I met AJ that day. We instantly hit it off. We clicked talking about so many of these projects. His foundation focuses on mentorship and scholarships. And he has done so much great work in the community, servicing so many students. And I talked to him about my organization and what we're doing. And he immediately said, I'm in. Let's do it, whatever you need. And he ended up sponsoring this event. His foundation is our sponsor tonight. So please, really, really big round of applause for AJ Donaldson.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. How are you today? Everybody good? All right. I like that. It's good energy. I want to first and foremost thank our host. He has given me way too much credit from the standpoint of this not being possible, because that's not true, and that's not true at all. This would not be possible if it wasn't for this young man. Please give it up for Moritz, please. I love you, and I'm also going to kill you because I had no idea it was going to be all these adults in the room. I thought it was all kids, right? He told me like 100 people. So I was like, yeah, 100 kids are coming here, and I see everybody dressed up. You guys look beautiful, and it's Friday. I'm coming in shorts, so forgive me, right? And my t-shirt, obviously I've got the brand on. Great job, exceptional job in general, putting this all together. And if you notice, there was no teleprompt, right? He knew the name of the organization. He knew the acronym. Most people don't know the acronyms. That's amazing. Great job. But yes, my name is AJ Donaldson. I am the CEO and founder of the EPIC Foundation. EPIC does stand for Experienced Professionals Impacting Communities. The direction of impact was the most essential part. Notice even the color that's on the eye. We do that on purpose because that's what it's all about. It's about impact. And our focus has always been based on education. And the fact that you have this young man at such an early age doing incredible things in the community, this is a testament to what's possible for our future. Amen? So please, once again, Moritz. So the dynamics of why I'm here today, I would be remiss not to be here present to such an incredible gathering talking about the Constitution. And when I met him, by way of Giving Gators, our good friend Dalen, incredible person. Does anybody know Dalen from Giving Gators? Anybody? Listen, incredible organization, absolutely. Big shout out to Dalen. If she's watching this video, if she's looking at this, girl, we love you. We love the things that she's doing here in Miami Lakes. Her heart is huge, and she does nothing for self. And so these are incredible human beings that we are associated to, that gives us the opportunity to be in areas like this. Now, when I say areas like this, understand, I grew up in this area, personally. Everybody remember, and I'm aging myself right now, forgive me, right? I'm wearing the hat on purpose so you don't see the bald head. But the dynamics of Opalaka, does anybody understand or remember an area, know an area called Opalaka? Yes? Yes. I'm aging myself here. Do y'all remember those commercials? Opalaka, Hialeah. Y'all remember those? Yeah, right? So that was right across the track for me. And growing up in a low-income home, a single mother who is still with us today, and she's at that stage of her life. I give all credit to my mom, Yvonne Donaldson. I honor her legacy. I honor everything she's done. My mother was a community leader. There was always a dynamic of, if I went somewhere, I was Yvonne Donaldson's son, right? It wasn't AJ, it was Yvonne Donaldson's son. And I'm proud to say, because of the mantle that was passed down from my mother to me, the dynamics of the impact that's getting ready to happen in our South Florida area, is understand Epic headquarters will always be headquartered here in South Florida. Things that we've had a chance to do. Now understand impact, that's what it's all about. But how? The way we've been able to impact the community is in three ways. Number one, to your point, scholarships, the money, the great equalizer. The one thing that is very important in this country as a capitalist society, no one's ever fooled us into understanding that it's anything else but capitalism. That's the dynamic of it. So there is that dynamic of the almighty dollar, correct? The great equalizer, the dynamics of low income socioeconomical situations. We wanted to ensure educational equity, if you've ever heard that before, that educational equity is truly delivered. And no matter what the child's socioeconomical situation is, they're able to get the support they need to navigate through the school system. Because we also understand, as much as school has its place, school is not enough. We as a community have to organize. We have to come together. We have to circle the wagons, because it truly does, and not to sound cliche, it really does take a village. It absolutely takes a village to raise a child. Now, understand the dynamics of what's going on here in our country right now by way of education. We understand another great equalizer that happened a couple of years ago, what's called COVID, right? COVID caused all of us to pause and start to decide what actually really matters most to all of us. And at the end of the day, I think the great connecting agent is our children, our innocents, our loved ones, our unconditional loved, innocent children. And I wouldn't necessarily call this young man a child because he's 15 going on 40, but when was your birthday, dude? 3 days ago. Happy birthday. Oh my God. You want me to start singing? You don't want me to start singing. Happy birthday. No, sorry. Okay. Thank you for that. And dude, congratulations. Happy birthday. 16 now? So driving? Almost. You're gonna really, well, at least he's thinking of driving, because a lot of kids don't even want to drive anymore. I'll just Uber. No, you will not. So good. I'm glad. And maybe you drive yourself to the gala. We'll say that. Sorry. And on behalf of a really good friend of mine, I would be remiss not to mention his name, the Honorable Manny Sid. This guy has been incredible in my life, the things that he's doing in the community, the dynamics of giving us an opportunity, a platform to speak to these kids, to gain access to ensuring these kids are supported. But like I said, the first thing, the most important thing was financial, the money. We needed to redirect wealth into our communities to ensure that everybody had an even playing field. Yes? Now, when COVID happened and we paused for a minute, we realized that a lot of the impact we had made came back. A lot of the kids that we supported, now I'm old at this point, I'm getting older. The dynamics of kids, because I was in the classroom at 22 years old. Actually, one of your council members was a former student of mine, Joshua Dieguez. And I'm embarrassed every time he tells people that I was his student, his teacher, because we look about the same age, right? No, I don't know. Don't tell Josh that. But the dynamics, I started in the classroom at an early age of 24, and the dynamics of these young people coming back now to pay it forward, just like this young man is doing. So mentorship is at its core, and that's the heart of the Epic Foundation. The dynamics of it takes a village to raise a child, but as we've seen in this country, some of the things that have happened, Stoneman Douglas, Uvalde. There's another African proverb that follows that it takes a village to raise a child. You may or may not be aware of it, because it's not something that's publicized very often. There's a lot of African proverbs, but this one in particular who follows that says, the child that's not embraced by its village will burn it down to feel its warmth. That's what's happening. School is not enough. We must organize. The last part that really accelerated our organization is career pathways. We had an exceptional visionary who was a part of our organization. I wear this wristband on his behalf to always remember his legacy, because we lost him about 9-10 months ago. Mental health, and it's a real thing. And I encourage all the men in the room to remember that we also have these emotions that we need to speak about, that we need to ask help for. Young men, my students, my male students, we have those same emotions. Please ask for help when you need it, because it takes a village. The dynamics of career pathways is what has accelerated us as an organization. And as of April, this past April, we celebrated 8 years. I haven't told you this, 8 years of impact. You probably did your research and already know this. 8 years of impact, 282 kids supported, $500,000 given away in scholarships and mentorship programming. That's epic. And with that said, we've accelerated so quickly that we now have a waiting list of 350. Right now, we are going national, but it always starts here in our backyard of sunny South Florida. And having young people like you in a place doing the things that you're doing to spread awareness, we are just an organization to help you provide access. And access, just like everything else in education, just like EPIC is an acronym, it stands for Accelerate Children's Certainty. Accelerate children's certainty so that they enter society successfully. You're giving them information so they can make more of informed decisions in everything they do day to day for their community. Last thing I will say, on behalf of Luis Gatasus, former board member of the honorary board member to this day, our guardian angel, the brother, our fallen angel, his vision was to see children be supported by us from cradle to career. Why was school invented? What is school supposed to be doing for our young people? Why is it that 27%, this is a real statistic, look at this up, why is 27% of our children graduating college working in their field of study? Only 27%. That means there are 73% of students are being recessed, are spending time in college, not knowing what they want to do, and then following a completely different pathway. We want to accelerate their certainty so they can find their purpose earlier, because we understand school has its place. If you want to become a brain surgeon one day, you ain't touching this head until you got 19 years of school. Y'all with me on that? So school has its place, but it's not enough. We must promote the trades. We must absolutely have vocational tracks. We need to make sure our kids are aware that there's so many other opportunities out there, because guess what? They already know. They have this thing called cell phones. And the cell phones are telling them that there's people out there making a whole lot of money who do not have college degrees. Yes, y'all know what I'm talking about. Yes, y'all see it. Am I talking truth here? So because of that, we must make sure we promote various tracks, various avenues for them to accelerate. Last thing I'll say in final, our Career Pathways program, as an example, we have an incredible member of our organization called Carell Gomez. He's going to be elated that I just said his name on the mic in front of you guys. My brother, Carell Gomez, I love this man dearly. He's been a hero in my life, just like Luis was. He has an organization around the corner called Draft Pros. Draft Pros Inc. happens to be one of the top 6 and 7 telecommunications and engineering companies in the US, since we're here talking about the United States of America. The dynamics of the trade track that he has created, because he is a young man, he's older than me, but as a young man, 11 years old, coming over here from Cuba, he worked his way up the ladder at AT&T, and he now started his own company, or he started his own company years ago, I think 6, 7 years ago. They're in pace to making $40 million. Very successful. And because of how hard he worked to get to where he is, he's now providing another track for other students. A child at 18 years old, upon graduating, can actually become certified through them. He pays them, sorry, side note. So instead of having your child go work at Foot Locker, he's paying them to certify them, to then potentially work for them. I have a child that's right now who's making anywhere from $3,500 to $5,000 a month part-time. That young man is not going to be recessed by debt in college. He's going to FIU because he can pay for it. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your listening. Please, again, continue to support our community. If you have social media, follow us, Epic South Florida. This is only the beginning. Expect to see this face again, because we're going to do some great things together. Again, give it up for Moritz. By the way, I brought my checkbook, bro. Like, am I going to give you this check today, or what are we doing? I got to pay for all this. What are we doing right now? Are we doing this check today? Okay, we figured it out. Listen, again, thank you for everything you're doing. You're incredible. You are a visionary. You are an example. Keep doing what you're doing, and whatever you need from us, we will be here to help you. Okay?
AJ Donaldson, ladies and gentlemen, please. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, AJ, for those very inspiring words. We really appreciate all you have done for us. Moving on to our next speaker. What an incredible man. Mr. Robert Brzezowski currently serves as the executive director for the Department of Social Sciences in Miami-Dade County Public School, the nation's fourth largest school district, if you guys did not know that. He has 27 years of experience in public education 11 of which were in the classroom and 16 in the area of curriculum and professional development. He holds a bachelor's degree from Bowling Green State University of Ohio, a master's degree from the University of Miami, and he also has a specialist degree in educational leadership from Barry University. Under his leadership, Miami-Dade County Public Schools Department of Social Sciences has really grown a lot and has been instrumental in the district's digital convergence initiative, where teaching is moving into both hybrid, digital, as well as in person. He has been able to boast multiple years of continuous improvement in standardized testing related to the social sciences. He wants his legacy as an educational leader to be able to return public school civic mission to prominence, and feels wholeheartedly that the skills needed to practice active citizenship must be practiced throughout one's educational experience. Robert is fluent in both English and Spanish, and learned Spanish while teaching abroad in Colombia during the early years of his career, and understands the importance of and has personally lived the benefit of learning another language. He prides himself on being an educational leader that shapes his department's work with student success and teacher support in mind. I met Mr. Brzezowski a few months ago downtown in the school board administration building, one of the district student government meetings. And he's always served as such an inspiration to our executive board as we try to serve students across Miami-Dade County. And today he will be giving a presentation on the importance of understanding the U.S. Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, Executive Director Robert Brzezowski. Thank you.
All right, you have. I'll let you know when, okay? Good evening, everybody. I want to recognize an incredibly special group in this room. Any public school teacher, can you please stand up? Any public school teacher in the room, please stand up. Round of applause for our public school teachers. You are the true guardians of democracy. And I know that sounds like a lofty goal for an elementary teacher, but when you are giving students the experiences of voting for a class mascot, you're letting them practice democracy. Those little things we do in the classroom at the elementary level are instrumental in giving students a pathway to being responsible, engaged, and informed citizens. And that is the be-all end goal of my department. I am so proud to lead some of the most talented teachers in MDCPS, the social studies teachers. Nobody is more passionate than what they do than a social studies teacher. Think back, adults in the room, to the crazy teacher you had in high school. I bet it was your history teacher. They made you remember things. And the larger community in Miami and in Florida, you need to know civic education and performance in Miami-Dade County Public Schools is incredible. We have a standardized test in 7th grade civics, and consistently MDCPS students have either been at the state performance average or above. This past year, 72% of our students in the entire county were at proficient level on the civics exam. So when we say, though, young people don't know anything about the government, that is simply not true. We have data to back it up. Likewise, we say, oh, kids don't understand or care about history. Also not true. We have an 11th grade U.S. history standardized test, and our students as well consistently are at the proficiency level of the state or above. Last year, 69% of our 11th grade students in Miami-Dade County Public Schools were proficient in the U.S. history exam. When you consider the makeup of our students in this county, many second language learners. The test is not in Spanish or Haitian Creole, the test is in English. Many students with learning challenges are in our public schools. So you put that fact on top of that is even more impressive. So I want to recognize another group in this room. Any middle or high school student in the room, please stand up and be recognized, which is most of you. Thank you. And the last group I want to recognize, any parent in the room, please stand up and be recognized. Thank you. You are the ones who drove them here. I don't know many teenagers who on a Friday night after a long week of school are at a town hall discussing Constitution Day. That's quite impressive that the level of commitment of the people in this room, just to stop, pause, and recognize the document that governs a lot of our life. So I'm going to take us back a little bit because I was a middle school teacher for 11 years. I taught civics for 11 years in Miami-Dade County Public Schools at Ponce Middle School. So I'm going to take you back a little bit to a middle school classroom. And those of you who are in middle school right now, I'm going to put you on the spot, see how much we learned, because this week we should have been learning a lot about the Constitution because tomorrow is Constitution Day. All right. Can anybody recite the preamble of the Constitution by memory? Come on up and do it. I got a cheat sheet. Don't worry. It doesn't have to be middle school. You can be high school. My generation, we learned this on Saturday morning from Schoolhouse Rock. How many of you remember the song in Saturday mornings? All right. So if you don't know, I do have a cheat sheet, but let's give it a shot.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, to provide to the general welfare, support the common defense. That's all. That's what I stopped.
He almost got it. Round of applause. Didn't want to secure the last part right there.
Blessings of the liberty to ourselves and our prosperity do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
Bravo. Yes, sir. When I was a kid, we learned the song because we just heard it all on Saturday morning like crazy, but I don't even think we connected what the heck the song was about, but we knew the words. But that preamble provides us with the goals of the U.S. Constitution right there. It's only, the U.S. Constitution is only 4 pages, all right? Only about 4,000 words, I think. 4,400 words. It's the shortest constitution in the entire world of a modern country. It's only been changed really 17 times because the first 10 amendments were added in 1791. The document was signed and ratified in 1789. The Bill of Rights added in 1791. And the other 27 minus 10, 17, the other 17 were added afterwards. And it's the last time it was changed was 1992, I believe. All right. And that was about Congress not the ones in the Congress at the moment not being able to give themselves a raise. All right. So if they want Congress to get a raise, they have to vote, and then the next people will get it, not them. And the one before that was what happened during the Vietnam War. Anybody know what the 26th Amendment did? Had to do with voting. What did the 26th Amendment do? Okay, so it's about the right to vote. Yep. One more time so everybody can hear.
It lowered the voting age to 18 years old.
Very good. You see how civics and history is sort of combined? Like we have to know the context of the Vietnam War at that time when that amendment was passed, because the people who were actually drafted to go fight the war didn't have a say in it. All right, let's go on to some fascinating facts, and you can pull this up on your phone. First thing that came up on Google when I said fun facts about the Constitution. All right. There's a few spelling errors in the Constitution. One of them is Pennsylvania is spelled wrong. That's kind of fun. Do you guys know if Thomas Jefferson signed the Constitution? Was Thomas Jefferson a signer? No, he was an ambassador in France at the time. What about John Adams? Did he sign it? No, he was in England at the time. All right, since 1952, where has the Constitution physically been held? Anybody know? Yes. National Archives is correct. Obviously, we know Constitution Day is when? The date? 17th, September 17th. Very good. All right. Do you know that the Constitution before the amendments does not give any qualifications to who can vote. That's up to the state. What amendment gives that power to the state? Yes. Which says? Very good. Very good. You're my people in this room. It's a live geek fest about the Constitution. I love it. All right. When the Constitution was signed, the U.S. population was about 4 million people. It's now much larger than that, about 310 million, I believe. At the time, Philadelphia was the largest city and it had about 40,000 people. There are two major compromises that were discussed that helped formulate and ratify the Constitution. Does anybody know what those two major compromises were? I got 3 stars in the room.
I know one of them. Okay, one of them was the Bill of Rights.
Okay, the Bill of Rights was added, you're right, and that helped ratify the Constitution, you're right. But there are 2 other compromises that basically said, all right, without this stuff, we may not have a Constitution at all. The Virginia plan kind of laid the groundwork. It had something to do with the creation of the bicameral legislature. Anybody know what that compromise was called? The Great Compromise. Very good. So the argument was, hey, how do we determine how many people are going to represent each state in Congress? And what they decided was, we're going to have one House of Congress that says equal representation, which would be which one? Which one? House of Representatives or the Senate? Equal representation. Which one is it? Senate, 2 per state. All right. And then the Great Compromise established the House of Representatives, which is based on what? Population, the number of people. All right. So here comes the big controversy with the Constitution that has basically haunted this country, right? There are certain states that says, yeah, but you know what? We got a lot of people in our state that aren't considered a citizen. And we're not going to be represented by those people. So what did they do? Sir, right there. The House of Representatives. What happened with those who were held in servitude when we were passing the Constitution?
3/5 compromise.
3/5 compromise. 3/5 compromise established that at the time, slaves will be counted as 3/5 towards the representation in the House of Representatives. All right. So if there's 2,000 people, how many people count for representation? Everybody getting their calculator out? 40% of that. Yeah. 800, exactly. Very good. Okay. All right. So those are some fun facts about the Constitution. The Constitution really is an incredible document. It's short. I think it's one of the most beautiful documents ever written in human history. And our Constitution has influenced greatly the world. Many emerging democracies have used our Constitution as a guideline. The United Nations Declaration of Human Rights was very much modeled after parts of our Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights. Now, it's not always, you know, everybody's happy with how we run society. There's always been division in our society. And to prove this point, I want to show a video that discusses how once we ratified the Constitution, we had sort of 2 camps of people, 2 schools of thought emerging about how we should run and view our government. So if we could have that video up. So you'll have to, you know, kind of move your neck around to the back or to the side to watch the video.
When it comes to interpreting the Constitution, in other words, determining what it means, there are 2 ways to do it, loosely or strictly. Loose interpretation, often called broad interpretation, takes a more casual approach. It means that something doesn't have to be stated word for word in the Constitution to exist. It can merely be implied. Strict interpretation is the opposite. The idea here is that the Constitution should be interpreted as literally as possible. In other words, if a power isn't written in the Constitution word for word, it doesn't exist. These two ideas were argued by two of our founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. Hamilton supported a loose interpretation of the Constitution based on evidence found in the Constitution, the Necessary and Proper Clause. Often called the Elastic Clause, the Necessary and Proper Clause states, Congress shall have the power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying out their duties in the Constitution. In Hamilton's opinion, the framers of the Constitution couldn't predict every law that would be needed, and included the Necessary and Proper Clause so new laws could be added in the future. Jefferson disagreed and took a strict interpretation of the Constitution. In his opinion, the Constitution should be interpreted exactly word for word as it was written. If it wasn't already in the Constitution, it shouldn't be added. Fast forward more than 200 years, and this argument continues because one side hasn't won out against the other. Justices on the Supreme Court are still divided, with more liberal judges favoring loose interpretation and more conservative justices favoring strict interpretation. This debate strongly influences the outcome of a case, depending on the year and which side of the argument is in the majority.
All right, so thank you for showing the video. So my purpose in showing this video is that to prove the point that since inception, since ratification, the Constitution has been a point of discussion at the very least, if not contention, about how we operate our government. We hear in the news all the time about how polarized we are in society and how we can't listen to each other and we're so divergent in the way we're thinking. And there's evidence towards that. But I think when we really look at history, this is nothing new. So I really, truly believe that the Constitution is a document that can bring us together. Right? When we understand the Constitution, when we understand the rights that are guaranteed through the Constitution, when we understand the limits of government as outlined in the Constitution, and we understand the flexibility of government that is outlined in the Constitution, we can then find a place to start having more civil discussions, I hope. So, last question, and this is an extended answer for any student who wants to answer. How do you think it is best to interpret the Constitution, loosely or strictly?
It's best to interpret the Constitution loosely because since there was only 400 pages and it was a very rushed revolution and everything, they didn't have time to input everything, and the changes that have happened socially and economically in the world do not account for everything that was written, and things have to be taken in interpretation.
Thank you. Does anybody share the opposite view that would like to share their thoughts?
I think strictly would be better because if it's loosely, it can be interpreted in one of two ways, for the greater good or for the not so greater good. And it can fall into the wrong hands and people can use it to benefit themselves and not the people.
Bravo. Can the two ladies that just responded stand up and be recognized for me for a second? Stand up. Round of applause for having a civil discussion and displaying to adults it's okay to disagree with one another. See how the Constitution could be a bridge builder? All right. So I often get from my adult friends out in the world, and I prefer to hang out with middle school kids because my maturity level is about 12. And my adult friends in the world, they're often telling me, wow, how do you handle working with young kids out there in public schools? Like when I see them out in public, I just can't even stand to be around them. And I keep telling them, on the contrary, I can't wait until the current teenage generation is in power and in control. You know why? Because they don't have half the hangups my generation did. They're so accepting, so tolerant, so free to accept individual differences that I really, truly believe our country is on it will have a future to a better path of equality and equity. So to all the young people in the room, I thank you, and don't become pessimistic. Keep your optimism. Morris, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I wish you all a wonderful Constitution Day tomorrow, September 17th.
One more time for Mr. Brzezowski, everyone. And I quickly wanted to say to his point at the beginning of how easy it is to read this Constitution. Thanks to the Epic Foundation, we were able to purchase pocket Constitution books that were being given out as you came in. So if any students do not have one, please make sure you got one on the way out so you can have a pocket Constitution with you. I also want to touch on a point that Mr. Brzezowski made about how important social studies teachers are. And I would just like to recognize a few social studies teachers that are here tonight. Ms. Deyarza, Ms. Adebisi, Ms. Nunez, if you could please stand up. I've had all three of them, and they have changed my life in one way or another, and I'm so grateful to have them here with me tonight. Now to introduce our next speaker, Juan Carlos, better known as JC Planas, is a former member of the Florida legislature and an attorney in private practice, specializing in ethics and election law. Mr. Planas started his legal career as assistant state attorney for the 11th Judicial Circuit in Miami-Dade County, Florida, prior to his election to the Florida House of Representatives in 2002. Having two litigious elections during his 8 years in the House, Planas developed an election practice after terming out of the legislature. Since 2010, he has participated in over 20 recounts of elections all over the state of Florida. He has litigated multiple circuits, seeking to remove unlawfully qualified candidates and preserving fair elections when challenged in the court. Since 2015, Mr. Planas has taught election law at St. Thomas University School of Law in South Florida. Over the past few years, JC has been interviewed as an expert on election-related matters by local, national, and even Canadian news. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for former Representative JC Planas. Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
So I was called and I was given a list of topics, and one of the topics was, how does the next generation preserve the Constitution? Raise the constitutions up. Hold them. It is a wonderful, brilliant document, and nothing is going to take that away. But it is not what has held this country together for almost 250 years. Because at the end of the day, just in January of 2021, we could have had a massive constitutional crisis. What's held this country together and what preserves the Constitution is not the Constitution itself, but it is this underbelly in American society that's been here from the beginning, that we are a free and liberal democracy and that we are to stay a free and liberal democracy forever. Because without that underbelly, without people thinking our democracy must continue, the Constitution can be wiped out. People can come in and people can totally do away with it. The only way to preserve the Constitution is for us always to believe that democracy must continue. We must fight against anything that attacks democracy at any point, anything that restricts individuals' rights to vote, because voting rights have actually become more. When I was a kid, we could vote on one day. We could vote on one day. If you wanted to register to vote, you had to go to a notary public who had to swear you in. Now we can register to vote online. We have 15 days to vote in person, and we can get a ballot by mail, and that's a good thing. I can tell you, I've been an election lawyer now since 2010. I like look at all elections. Our elections are safe and secure. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay? In the small cases, if there is fraud, you actually see it the next day. Even people who are as bad at math as me can see a spreadsheet of the turnout, and they will see if there is any sort of anomaly. So don't let them lie. Keep that perseverance that we are a liberal democracy and we will always be. Now, I'm speaking to kids. Who here is, I guess the average age seems to be like what, 14, 12 to 14? What's the average age here? 13. All right. So in 5 years, you're going to be in high school, and your government teacher, as part of the high school plan, is going to give you an application to register to vote. You'd be surprised how many kids basically don't do anything with that. So you want to preserve the Constitution, you fill that card out, and then you vote. Because being registered to vote and not voting, it's like if they didn't register you. You have no, if it was up to me, and I sometimes get skewered for saying this, I would actually lower the voting age to 16 because 16-year-olds are in school, 16-year-olds are driving, 16-year-olds are either paying for their car insurance or having their parents, 16-year-olds are going out and getting jobs at McDonald's, at Publix, and have to live by the wage laws. So for me, the government is reaching so deep into these 16-year-olds' lives that I would actually lower it. But you know the truth is that even the 18-year-olds who have the right to vote don't do it. Because in 2020, we actually had high voter turnout. While 40-year-olds voted at 70%, we celebrated because 18 to 21-year-olds voted at almost 50%. And we celebrated because it was a rise. That's not a reason for celebration. That's something that we should all be ashamed of. Why are 18-year-olds not voting? At the end of the day, if we poison our planet, at the end of the day, if the seas rise and we're wading in the water, that's the world that you guys are inheriting. Us adults are sometimes messing up the world for you kids. So you kids should be as eager as possible to get the right to vote, hopefully so you can fix the mistakes that my generation has made. In order to, like 250 years, in 2026, okay, we're going to celebrate 250 years. I remember I was 6 years old during the American Bicentennial in 1976. I remember some of it. But 250 years old, when you look at, and Lorenzo, or actually, no, you said our Constitution is more brief than other countries. England, for instance, doesn't even have a constitution. England's, current government is actually younger than 250 years because power didn't shift from the House of Lords into the House of Commons until way after we had actually established our democracy here. Our constitutional republic is older than the democracies and the republics of most countries. And the only reason that is so is because of that underbelly. Now, we were 4 million people when the Constitution gets adopted. Why do you think we're 300 million now? Because these 4 million didn't multiply. Why are we a country of 300 million? And I think most of the parents in this room know why. Because of the greatest thing in the history of the world, immigration into the United States of America. Because we all came from somewhere. And at the end of the day, hold up the Constitution again. Even though when it was written, it didn't give African Americans a right, it didn't give women the right to vote, it actually didn't even give the right to vote to anybody. The way it's been interpreted, the way, especially thanks to the 14th Amendment, which is very much under attack, but because of the way the Constitution has been interpreted, it now makes it so whether you came on the Mayflower Whether you came on a steamship, whether you came in the hull of a slave ship, whether you came on a boat, on a raft, we are all the same. Nobody knows where England comes from. It like rises up from the dust. Nobody knows where Germany comes from. It's all these tribes that come together. We know where America comes from, and we know what you have to do to become American. You can't really, you can become a British citizen, but you can't become English. You become American. How do you become American? You ascend to the views that are in that little constitution that you have. But that's under attack also, because there are people now who think that all of a sudden this should be a certain type of country. I look here in a sea and I see the diversity that made this country great. The diversity that is what will make sure that the Constitution stays alive forever. It is in these two girls that debated on the interpretation of the Constitution that I see how the Constitution can stay alive forever. It is in the diversity of our people. It is in the people wanting to maintain a free and liberal democracy. So I was asked to come and speak how the next generation can preserve the Constitution by believing that we have a right to always elect our leaders and vote them out of office. And when they get voted out of office, they need to leave office peacefully, and that we should have a peaceful transition of power, and that no matter what, those rights and these traditions cannot ever be taken away. So I see a lot of girls, boys. Who here plays basketball? Who here plays pickup basketball? No? All right, pickup basketball. You go out on in the court, right? Do you have a rule book? No. Why? Because you know the rules, right? You have an understanding at how it is that you're going to play. You can't elbow someone. That's going to be a hard foul. You can't do that, right? Okay. That's sort of what I mean. He doesn't have a constitution. He doesn't have the NBA rule book, but he has this fundamental thought that when he goes out on that pickup basketball court, nobody's going to elbow him. If not, it's going to be a hard foul, and that kid's going to be kicked off of the court. That, no matter what, there's going to be a certain amount of time. It's still going to be, even though you don't have it written down, it's still going to be 2 points for the shot, and a foul, you're going to get your shots. That's the underbelly of democracy that I'm talking to you guys about. It's the same exact thing. And as long as we always preserve that those rules are there, they will never destroy us, and our Constitution will prevail. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, former Representative Planas, for those very wise and inspiring words. And I hope that everybody in the audience is taking note and is remembering this as we start to end the evening. Last but not least, we have a very special speaker, because unlike the previous three, she's a student, and I'm proud to call her a very good friend. Melanie is a senior at the School for Advanced Studies Wolfson campus, and she's passionate about constitutional law, international relations, and legal procedures. She enjoys teaching civic literacy and public speaking skills to other students, and is the senior assistant coach for the legal studies team at Miami Lakes Middle School. In the past, she's advocated for youth voter registration as a national ambassador for the nonpartisan organization When We All Vote. She serves as co-founder for the largest independently assembled conference in Florida, FLOMUN, dedicated to allocating resources for Title I middle schools in Miami-Dade County. She's also youth commissioner for District 13 and hopes to continue her advocacy for youth civic engagement and equity in education. Ladies and gentlemen, Melanie Ulloa.
Thank you so much for that, Moritz. As he said, I am Manny and I am from the School for Advanced Studies, so I'm a senior in high school. And when Moritz reached out to me about speaking tonight, I thought that it was such a wonderful opportunity, not only because, we know each other very closely, we've gone to the same schools, and we've worked together in several projects, but also because I thought that it was wonderful that he wanted to really preserve the idea of not only involving the leaders that we already have in our community, but also involving students, which is at the core of the mission of this entire foundation that he's creating. So I was very grateful, and I'm not only here to represent, students in the county, but also because the first time that I was here about 3 to 4 years ago was with my social studies teacher as well, and my legal studies teacher in middle school, Mrs. Lisa De Arza, and I'm so grateful. And back then, we were the first middle school in Florida to win the national invitational about We the People regarding constitutional rights. That was one of my proudest, and not my proudest moment so far. So I'm very grateful for that. And being back here, speaking to all of you, I kind of see a piece of how I was back then in middle school. The majority of you here are in middle school. Thanks to Ms. Diaz that you're here watching this presentation. And I'm very grateful to see how I've evolved and how all of you will somehow be in my position one day and will also be in the position of all the previous speakers that have been presenting today. So without further ado, I wanted to distinguish my presentation a little bit more from the previous speakers because I wanted to talk about constitutional rights in specific to how they apply in our classrooms. And this has been something that has been very controversial, at times, and it has evolved. We have had this concept of having the right to protect speech and having the right to protect expression, but not always has this been executed equally and fairly, and not always have all the students from marginalized groups, minority groups, had the ability to express their rights and kind of practice that. So use the clicker here. I want to talk a little bit about something that one of the speakers previously mentioned, landmark cases, case law that we just learned that influences, right, a lot of the decisions that make the laws, whether that's on a national scale or even to the smallest local scales of our community. And a Supreme Court case that has been very essential in the rights of students in the classroom was Tinker versus Des Moines. We spoke about the Vietnam War, and how that before then, 18-year-olds were not allowed to vote. So they were being drafted into the Vietnam War, and this case is founded upon the rights of students that were 18 years old to be not only drafted, but also have a voice and a say in the laws that are passed in the Constitution. So in the majority decision, former Supreme Court Justice Abe Fortas, he mentioned that this concept of students shedding their rights at the schoolhouse gate was not allowed, and it was in fact unconstitutional, because although we do have limits in how we can exercise our rights in an appropriate school environment, they are not completely removed and taken away. So that's something that we have to acknowledge, and I just wanted to preface with that. Now, for the purposes of this, I'm going to be focusing more so on the freedom of speech that we have, but I also wanted to highlight that we have other rights. So freedom of speech refers to not only verbal or spoken words, but also symbolic speech, as well as having the right to protest, which I will go into the limits of that as well, and petitioning in our school communities. And that goes anywhere from elementary to high school to college and universities as well. But we also have certain other rights, which I wish I had more time to discuss in depth, including immigrant protection, where you do not have to prove your immigrant status to schools, and the undocumented may not be prohibited or prevented from attending public education. I also want to highlight that I'm speaking about public schools and rights in public schools because private schools are not directly associated with the government and therefore have their own separate laws and procedures. And we also have equal guidelines. Something that's very discussed today is dress codes, how they're implemented, whether it's done equally. So although we do have the right to enforce a dress code, we have to emphasize that it should be enforced equally, regardless of gender, of age group. We also have rights for pregnant students and students with disabilities, which is something that I believe that this county has done a very good job of highlighting, more so with the education that we provide to kind of foster the most equal environment for all of these groups that are minorities or marginalized. Now, when I speak about freedoms, in schools, which do we have and which don't we have, or which are slightly limited? We do have the ability to speak out as students, express our opinions, have protests and petitions. Something that's become common in the past couple of years, whether it was after the Stoneman Douglas shooting, has been walking out as a form of protest. And although you may be reprimanded for walking out, you may not be reprimanded for expressing your ideas and your opinions about the topic that you're walking out for. So I wanted to make that important distinction because I know that that's been something very recent, especially following certain events that have happened regarding school shootings and schools being threatened. So we also have the right to wear expressive clothing that express like what we believe in, as long as they don't fall under certain categories, which I'm going to get right into. So what I mean by this is not only do we have the ability to express or say verbally that we believe in certain things and that we want certain actions to be taken in the school, but we could also use this as a form of representative speech, and we could wear it on our shirts. We wear a lot of what we're associated. I'm wearing a pin for this amazing foundation, but it's about, for example, Tinker versus Des Moines, going back to that, how they were able to, as the Supreme Court decided, wear wristbands with a peace symbol. That it spoke about their protest against the Vietnam draft of 18-year-olds without the right to vote. And eventually, movements like those and movements like these that are occurring at this time are what's going to shape not only local laws, but also national state laws. And eventually that had a great influence in the implementation and passing of the 26th Amendment. And stuff like that can apply for current and future problems that we're having as students. Now, there are certain limits which I also wanted to discuss, and we've all been very well made aware of these limits, which include, disrupting the school environment. And when we disrupt the school environment, the problem comes in. We were discussing with loose and strict interpretation. The American Civil Liberties Union, which is an organization that advocates a lot for, the rights of the people, individual rights, and the protection of minority groups, has been trying to equalize, setting certain definitions about how we are going to apply limits to disruptions. When we talk about disruptive school environments, it's not always as clear as to who decides that, and that's your school administration. And that's why it's important to advocate for what you believe in, and not only try to pursue that, but pursue it through a way that it is going to be accepted, there's going to be communication, and that you're going to be able to do this without breaking or breaching kind of the part where you cannot cross, which is disrupting the environment. And not only that, but obviously threatening the rights of others or harming the rights of others, and passing upon that line of you're not just expressing your rights, but you're in violation of someone else's. So I wanted to outline very clearly those distinctions between the freedoms and the limits of rights in schools. Now, obviously, I'm speaking about this continuity that we have, about the right to express our ideals, not only through verbal speech, but also symbolic expression. But I do want to mention a couple of things that have been recently in the news, whether that's legislation or Supreme Court cases that are being ruled on that are a little bit more prevalent to our age group. So who here has social media? Everybody raise your hands. Yeah. All right. So if I would have said that a couple of years ago, social media wouldn't have even existed, or we wouldn't have imagined that it would have existed in all the platforms that it does today. However, social media has just breached the communication gap between people that are in the same state to people all over the world that have the ability to get to know each other and network and build this communication. So a very prevalent issue today in schools is how one's expression in social media can affect one in the school environment, especially when you're speaking about school topics, right? So I wanted to talk about a recent Supreme Court case. And this was in Pennsylvania in a school district, Hanoi area school district versus BL, where a student discussed through social media platforms about a dissatisfaction with what could be considered, inappropriate language about not getting into a cheerleading team, right? And so the school, however serious or not serious this matter may have been, tried to basically reprimand the student for expressing her opinions on a social media platform, right? So many of us may have different opinions about that, but eventually this case reached the Supreme Court. And since she expressed this in an off-campus form of speech, the Supreme Court upheld that this was not a matter of interest or serious interest in the school, and therefore she could not be reprimanded for expressing her rights and beliefs in social media platforms outside of campus, even though it had to do with school activities and events. So that's something very important where we're starting to see this change, that not only does it apply to, giving a speech at a graduation, but it also applies to how you communicate and hold yourself outside of school hours. So there is this balance that is stricken once again by the Supreme Court. They not only consider the rights of the school, but also the individual rights of the student. And that's the common theme that you're going to see, not only when, you're having situations like these, but also when you're having personal conversations with your school administrators, your teachers, and you don't know whether you can confide in them, to what extent you could express yourselves to them. So it's always very good to know how much you can say, what you can say, and just be aware of that, guys, because social media, although you can delete a post and although you can delete your information, it's forever. And so that's something that not many people consider, especially at our age, that it's something permanent. Another thing I wanted to mention, which has been all over the news, especially in the state of Florida, highly controversial, has been the passing of the Parental Rights and Education Bill. And so I want to reference this very objectively and how it has kind of shifted the jurisdiction of the government in how a student and a teacher can communicate regarding personal information. So before, we were just thinking of, this concept of the right to express your opinions to, school administrators, students, and teachers. But now certain aspects of this expression are or are not being limited depending on the topic. And although this is a very controversial thing, I do believe that it is showing a kind of change in how much jurisdiction we're giving to the schools. And that is something that you guys should stay up to date to and advocate for your own opinions, regardless of how you feel about this. So I believe that staying informed is key to realizing your rights in schools, because not only do you have the right to speak out and you have the right to protest and also petition to your administration and your teachers, but you also have the right to be informed and kind of see how this is so quickly changing. One day you could have a right and then the other day something passes and you're not aware of it and you're in violation of the new laws that come about. So I wanted to really focus on, the rights that you have in the classroom, how much they changed, and not only that, but how much they will continue to change and how you can be a key part of that process. So one thing that I really love to do outside of school with FLOMA, and as Maritz mentioned, is really reaching out to Title I middle schools in the county. And oftentimes it saddens me to know that they might not be as aware as I have always been and had the opportunity to be about their rights in the classroom and about how it's changing. So I hope that all of you, you're taking this first step by being here, by being in the legal studies program, many of you at your local middle school. And I hope that you continue to follow that path beside me. And I hope to see you in the future, not only as students, but also as professionals. Hopefully most of you stay here and we can form a community and we will forge the path that will lead us into the future. So I'm very grateful to have had the chance to speak here. And thank you all for listening. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask or reach out to me after this. But have a great rest of your night. And I hope that I see you all.
Wow, what an incredible presentation by Melanie. Come on, one more time for Melanie, guys. So as we're about to wrap up this evening, one more time, I want to hear it for our speakers, Mr. Brzezowski, Melanie, Mr. Kobiea had to leave a little earlier. He's actually currently being interviewed by a local news channel, as well as former Representative Plana. So it's just such a nice evening, and I'm so proud to have so amazing and experienced speakers with us today. And right as we're about to wrap up, I want to do one more thing. All of you guys, students, you have the booklet, raise it up. Yes. I want you guys to go to the back side, all the way to the back, in the back cover. And I want you guys to read that pledge with me. That's a pledge we're all making here today. Ready? I, as one of we, the people of the United States, affirm that I have read or will read our U.S. Constitution and pledge to maintain and promote its standard of liberty for myself and for my posterity. And do hereby attest to that by my signature. So all of you guys are going to sign that later. Read this. It's very, 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 very important. Before we finish up, I want to give a huge thank you to my executive committee. We have Ashley, Michelle, Leo. Big round of applause, please. I'm so happy to have such an amazing team. And if any of you guys out there want to join, in the folder, there is a QR code that you can fill out where we can keep you updated with our events and you can volunteer with us. I'd like to give a big thank you again to the Office of Mayor Manny Sid in the town of Miami Lakes, his assistant, Mr. Joseph Sosa. Amazing, amazing, amazing job. Once again, Ms. Adebisi, member of our board of directors, my former teachers, Ms. Deyarza, Ms. Nunez, everybody here. Thank you. Thank you, guys. I hope that you have all learned a little bit and that you leave tonight feeling more filled with knowledge on the U.S. Constitution and feeling more determined and passionate to go out there in your community and make a change. Thank you so much, everybody.